The government has recently given the go-ahead for the expansion of Heathrow Airport. This is a very controversial issue. Some people say that the expansion is necessary for economic growth and stability. The rest say that the government may as well give up on plans to meet ambitious emissions cuts targets. I was lucky enough to meet with John Stewart from Hacan Clear Skies to talk about what this decision means for England, London and for the Labour Party. So John, how is the feeling in the anti-expansion group feeling about this decision to expand the airport?
Well, people are angry, but we also in a funny sort of way feel quite confident at the end of the day we can probably win. The government has dropped some of its proposals. It wanted to bring more planes on the existing runways, and that's gone. But of course it has given the green light to BAA, the owners of Heathrow Airport, to draw up detailed plans for expansion of a third runway, and that's what we will now be fighting very hard to defeat.
And approximately how many people are going to be affected by the expansion?
The expansion of Heathrow would have, and the construction of a third runway would have an enormous impact. On government figures, at least 700 homes have been knocked down, probably more. That's putting 2,000 to 3,000 people out of their homes. But of course, if you've got a new runway, you've also got a new flight path. And again, on government figures, at least 150,000 people will be under a new flight path, many of them for the first time, with a plane coming over their heads, one every 90 seconds, for right throughout the day.
And of course that has implications in terms of local schools and schools underneath the flight path.
This has huge implications for children learning under the flight path. Children who learn under the existing flight path really do suffer. But what's going to happen now with children who have never been under a flight path before, they're going to be faced with every single day virtually in which they're at school and right throughout the day for a plane coming over, interrupting their lessons, one every 90 seconds, and all the evidence shows from all the academic institutions that if children learn under a flight path because of the noise, their learning does suffer.
So what we've got anything from all of these areas being currently affected. Would that be fair?
That's about right, and that of course is a huge area. You know, that's most of London and some of the surrounding areas of the home counties.
And there's a lot of circling happening overhead, which obviously means increased noise. Circling is happening where?
The circling happens a bit further out. What actually happens is there are 4 what are called holding stacks. When planes arrive, they're not brought straight into the airport. They're brought into a holding stack, and there's 4 of them in the various areas around London. And planes in a holding stack are one above the other, so they get quite high. If they get too high, they release the ones at the bottom, and then in effect they're held over London, so you get planes doing this sort of trombone shape like that before they hit their final landing path.
Now the proposed runway is going to be
further north. It's just about there. That's right. That's right.
And obviously with another runway comes new flight paths.
Now the new flight path is going to be north of the existing one, and it's going to be over places like Southall, no planes right now at all. The northern part of Chiswick, no planes right now at all. Going over the northern part of Hammersmith, pretty clear of planes right now. And then going over really smart areas like High Street, Kensington, which includes the road with the most expensive houses in the UK. They've got no planes right now at all. What those houses are going to do is have a plane one every 90 seconds.
BAA, along with other pro-expansion lobby groups, are saying that the expansion is likely to create in excess of 700,000 jobs. And considering that unemployment in the UK is at its highest since the 1990s, how can we argue against the potential for another, 700,000 plus jobs in the UK?
We think the BAA and others in the aviation industry are playing a cruel hoax
on unemployed people by claiming that the expansion of this airport will result in 700,000 extra jobs. They don't say where that figure comes from, and while clearly there will be jobs in the very short term, in construction, if you invest in anything you get jobs, in the long term the trend in the aviation industry is for fewer jobs rather than more, because technology is taking over the work that people used to do. And what's interesting is that despite all the claims that were made 10-15 years ago that the second runway in Manchester would create tens of thousands of jobs, there's actually fewer people working today at Manchester Airport with a second runway in place than there was 10-15 years ago when it only had one runway.
Given that there is so much opposition to the expansion of the airport from people concerned about noise, air pollution, and obviously the huge and growing environmentalist movement in the UK, what do you think that the pushing ahead with expansion plans would mean for the Labour government?
We think the Labour government has signed a suicide note in saying they'll go ahead with a third runway, because both the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, the two main opposition parties, have said if they came to power they would scrap expansion. Now, the final plans, the detailed plans for a third runway cannot be agreed this side of an election. So it means that Labour goes into the election with, as one Conservative councillor said to me, clear blue water between the Conservatives and Labour on the issue. Labour could lose many, many seats, up to a dozen, on this issue alone. But more than that, commentators are now arguing that they've lost any green credibility. And so across the nation as a whole, they could lose yet more votes. This, as I say, is a suicide note as far as Labour is concerned, so much so that I don't think they'll be in a position after the next election, because they won't be there, in order to give the final permission for a third runway.